All right, welcome to pay periods and employment. Our objectives today are to compute weekly, semi-monthly, and bi-weekly earnings given an annual salary. In order to do this, you need to understand how many pay periods there are in a given year, based on if you're paid on a weekly, semi-monthly, or bi-weekly basis. Most high school students, you guys, are paid on a weekly basis, which means you receive 52 paychecks per year since there are 52 weeks in a year. Your paycheck will usually fall on the same day each week. However, you need to understand that not all jobs have a pay period of 1 week. My job pays me on a monthly basis. So it's good to understand how to calculate what you're going to make. Let's look at a few statistics before we get into the calculations. Some interesting statistics on employment. All right, out of 155 million workers in the U.S., and there were about 155 million workers back in a few years ago, 2008, 2009. These are some of the typical occupations and the number of employees in that occupation. And it's just very interesting to see that teachers, there's 7.2 million teachers. That vastly outnumbers any of the other professions. So becoming a teacher, and there's lots of different types of teachers, not just high school, there's middle school, elementary, there's technical, there's college level. There's a vast array of teachers all put into that occupation, but there's quite a few. And then if you'll notice, hairdressers, hairstylists, and cosmetologists number quite a few as well as on the bottom down here, inspectors, testers, sorters, samplers, weighers. So we know there's a lot of jobs in those areas, but it would be interesting to look at the current job reports to see which areas are growing. But you can kind of go through here and see, another thing that I thought was interesting is that there's only 87,000 service station attendants. So not very many of those. All right, some other, and this comes from the Statistical Abstract of the United States for in 2009, and the census is done every 3 years, so that's why it's 2009. But you can definitely Google that, and you can find some interesting information on jobs and what jobs are hiring and things like that. The other thing down here is that there are 7.7 million workers that are called Moonlighters, and that's because they hold more than one job. In fact, one of your parents may hold more than one job. A lot of people will hold more than one job. In fact, 7.7 million people hold more than one job. That's quite a bit. And of those people, 300,000 of them hold 2 full-time jobs. So not just a full-time and a part-time, but 2 full-time jobs. 28% of workers actually work overtime. They work more than 40 hours per week, which means they are on an hourly scale versus somebody like myself or anybody else that has a professional type job. You may work more than 40 hours per week, but you may not be counted because you're not paid hourly. 17 million workers leave for work between midnight and 6 in the morning. 3.1 million workers travel over 90 minutes to work, so they are commuting quite a distance. And 10.4 million workers are self-employed. And that's interesting too. A lot of people like to start their own business and go for it that way. And then 5.7 million workers work from home. Just some interesting statistics. Let me show you a few more statistics before we actually get going. So in this next, or I don't know if they're necessarily statistics, but on this next slide, we are talking about finding a job. And here's some firefighters. And this is a specific type of job. And when you choose your job, you usually will choose it in a field of interest, but you need to develop skills in that area in order to be hired or to be considered for that job. Like, for example, firefighting. You can't just apply to be a firefighter unless you go out and get certifications and you get trainings and you have been through an academy. You can receive trainings from college, from trade schools, or just on the job as an apprentice. That is common as well. But you do need to figure out, where am I going to receive this training so that I can be considered for this job. When you are looking for a job, typically the classified ads, online sites like monster.com or LinkedIn, also employment agencies. You can go to an employment agency. The hard thing about that, though, is that if you have no experience, then oftentimes you have to pay them a fee in order for them to find you a job. All right, let's actually look at some skills that you might need in order to calculate the different types of pay periods. So you might want to write this down. We have the different pay periods. We have weekly, and that's pretty obvious, self-explanatory. There are 52 periods in a year if you're paid weekly. We have bi-weekly, which means you're paid every other week. And if there are 52 periods in a year and you divide that by 2, that means there are 26 periods in a year if you're paid bi-weekly. So you'll be paid 26 times in a course of a year. If you're paid semi-monthly, then you're paid twice a month. And that seems like bi-weekly, right? Every other week. But in fact, there are 12 months in a year. And so that means you're actually paid over 24 periods in a year. So you're paid 24 times a year. So that's very different. So when someone offers you an annual salary, depending upon how you're paid, you'll be able to figure out how much you're going to get in that week or that month or bi-weekly. And then lastly, monthly, which again is very self-explanatory. That's 12 times a year, once a month. Okay, so let's try some sample problems for calculating. All right, in this first problem, Christina is paid bi-weekly. Her annual salary is $37,000. So they offered her $37,000. She wants to know what she's going to get paid bi-weekly. What is her bi-weekly salary? And we're going to round to the nearest cent. So hopefully you wrote it down. If you did not write it down, you can go back here. We're going to head back. Maybe just 1 second. We'll have to scroll back. And here we go. Bi-weekly is every other week, right? And then we know there are 26 periods in a year. So she's going to be paid 26 times in a year. So let's do some calculations. We know her annual salary, or she might know her annual salary, is going to be $37,000. And we want to know what she is paid each pay period. So we're going to find her gross pay each pay period. So the gross pay is going to be equal to her salary. This is her annual salary, right? Over the course of a year. And we would need to divide that by the number of pay periods. And we know that if she is paid bi-weekly, there's 26 pay periods in a year. So we can just take our calculator and we can calculate that as 37,000 divided by 26. Which means her paychecks, her gross paychecks before any deductions, and remember we talked about deductions, is going to be $1,423, and we are rounding to the nearest cent. So I'm looking here, this is 7 cents, but I have a 6, so this would be 0.08, we would round up. And this can help Christina plan. You know, if she's going to be paying rent and she's looking for an apartment, she knows approximately what she's going to be getting paid every other week. And so this can help her plan, you know, that, hey, I can't afford a $6,000 a month apartment. Most people can't, but it does help her to plan. Okay, now let's take our information and let's express this just using a general equation. So Carlos earns X dollars biweekly. So we don't know what this is. Christina was earning $37,000. They told us we know, but we don't know for Carlos. But we want to express his annual salary algebraically. And again, the point of this is to create an equation so that we can use it for anybody. So Carlos, and we just need to define our variable, and it's defined for us, is paid X dollars biweekly. So we have X, and it's biweekly. So we know there's 26 periods in a year. So X divided by 26 will always get us our salary biweekly. All right, good. Let's try one more example. So let's look at, and here we have, again, a quick summary. We're going to move on. To Manny here. So Manny is paid semi-monthly. And again, you need to think about what does semi-monthly mean. Semi-monthly means twice a month. There are 24 months or 12 months in a year. So he is going to be paid 24 times twice a month in a year, right? So we have 12 months in a year and he is paid twice a month. And that's how we get 24. Okay, his semi-monthly salary is $1,239. What is his annual salary? So now it's given to us backwards. Well, he is paid, so let's go ahead and figure out his salary, his gross salary again. His gross salary is going to be equal to this amount that he is paid each pay period, 1,239. But then instead of dividing this time, because it's already been divided, we know we need to multiply by the number of pay periods in a year, and that's 24 pay periods in a year. So we can then find what he makes in a year, and you can do the same thing with your weekly salary by just multiplying by 52. So if you take 1,239 times 24, he actually makes a pretty good salary. He makes $29,736. All right, now let's go ahead and do what we did last time. Alex is paid semi-monthly. Again, we know that's 24 times a year. His annual salary is Y dollars this time. So now we're actually given his annual salary. We want to express his semi-monthly salary algebraically. All right, so again, we're going to look at semi-monthly, and I'm just going to do a little SM versus annual. This is our annual, so I'm doing an A here just to differentiate between our variables. So his semi-monthly salary, well, we know his annual salary. That is Y, okay? We want to know his semi-monthly salary. So we would just work backwards. We would take this 29,736 or Y because we don't know, and we would go backwards and we would divide it by 24, and that will give us his semi-monthly salary. So we just have to be careful when we're doing these problems that we are solving for what the problem is asking. All right, and that concludes our lesson today over pay periods and employment. So hopefully you feel pretty comfortable with the different types of pay periods, and you will be able to calculate an annual salary or a semi-monthly salary or a bi-weekly salary or even a weekly salary. So go ahead to the next page and try the practice.